Is it fair to say that for a lot of the larger banks, these regulations are irritating, but for the rest of the market, for those that are trying to compete at the lower levels, it's anti-competitive. They can't even get in this game. So there's sort of this unholy alliance between the too-big-to-fail banks and the regulators who, one, aren't holding them accountable, and two, are making sure that they can't have any real competition outside of those huge, established, too-big-to-fail entities.
No, I mean, I think you put it very, very well, and I think it's the biggest misconception, or one of the biggest misconceptions that people have about big business. Big business is not pro-free market. They are pro-business, and it's very different. In the case of the financial markets, as you pointed out, Goldman Sachs and Citigroup and J.P. Morgan, frankly, they can live with Dodd-Frank. It's very complex. The compliance costs are enormous. They can absorb them because they are large and they have a lot of assets. If you are a competitor to those large firms that is smaller or medium-sized, that cost of compliance is going to be a much bigger bite out of your bottom line as a percentage of profits. So those smaller banks are going to be driven out of business, and this happens quite a bit where large businesses like complex regulations because it actually gives them a competitive advantage against their smaller competitors.
Hey, Peter, it's Will Kane. So I remember last time you were here, you were talking about your book, Throw 'Em All Out. And we were talking about the insider deals and the cronyism of Congress and their ability to get special stock trades and tips and deals. And I remember making the argument to you that I feel like if we focus on the cronyism, we're focusing on a symptom, that this is endemic to a system that allows it. I'm feeling something similar today. The cronyism, I'm sure, is part of the problem with the Justice Department denying to prosecute these big banks. But let me read you this quote from he's a lawyer at a securities firm called Carter, Ledyard, and Milburn. He said the likelihood of the Justice Department indicting a too-big-to-fail bank like Goldman Sachs was always slim to none. Why? Because they look back to the Enron scandal when they did go after Arthur Andersen and they put him out of business. Thousands of people out of jobs. I'm wondering, do we have too big to fail and too big to prosecute? Are these banks simply no way to go after them because they kill the economy?
Well, that's a great question, Will, and I think it's important to raise it. As we ask the question, too big to fail, too big to jail.
Right.
I think the difference is, in the Enron case, not only were there criminal charges brought against individuals, but actually there were criminal charges brought against Arthur Andersen, the corporate entity. And that's what led it to collapse. I think what we're really calling for is not criminal charges against, a large investment house. We're saying that there certainly is an email record that there were individuals who were pushing investment products that they knew were bad, that they were awful, they were terrible, they used expletives to describe how bad they were, and yet they were going to investors, in some cases to institutional investors or individuals, and saying, these are really good, you should buy them. There are also instances where large banks or large mortgage companies like Countrywide were literally selling billions of dollars worth of mortgages that they knew were fraudulent, that they knew were bad, but they were telling Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac that, no, these are very good, we vetted them, and they're secure. Well, that's fraud. My point is not that you indict the entire company, but the individuals who were responsible for that. This is what happened in Enron. You find the individuals who are responsible, and you charge them criminally. And I think it has to be done because ultimately, the only way that you have a free market that works, I think, is by having minimal rules, but you have to enforce the rules. And if you're not willing to enforce laws that deal with fraud, there's no point in really having any of those rules, because that's the bedrock, I think, of a free market economy, the recognition that if you defraud somebody, you are going to be held in criminal account.
Will, it sounds